sign in. Quickly. Yep. So for everyone who's here, there's a sign-up sheet real quickly on the chat there. David's just linked it. It's just for us to know who's attended what up on the event tonight. So it's just your ZID and your name, if that's all right. And yep, just your email, your name, and your ZID.
Is this the first online event you guys have had since the lockdowns, or have you already had a couple?
No. So 2 weeks ago we had something similar. So it's a two-part career event. So 2 weeks ago we had one which had Jono and Remo in it as well, actually.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was, so this one's more about firms and I guess what it's like to be in a firm, or I guess from Jesse's point of view, like what you expect when you're hiring someone. And 2 weeks ago we did one based more on like, what do you do after your undergrad? So whether that's masters or doing what Remo did, which is changing courses, like pathways altogether, but staying in the environment, whether that's going to work, and like Isabel was talking about traveling and doing work outside and stuff and independent work. So kind of just exploring the options. And now this is more so about getting into a firm. So it's a two-part series. And it was like I said to Jesse yesterday, it would have been nice to have this in person, but you know, what can you do? Jess is here.
Yeah, I'm here, Gene. I didn't get a chance to say hi. We haven't actually seen each other in person, but
that's all right. Hi, Jesse.
It's nice to see you.
Same with Jared. I've seen you around so many times in like studio, but I haven't had you yet, so it's a bit of a shame. All right, I think is Celine third on the list, or was she second, David?
So I'm going to introduce them as a group, and we can have it more as like a dialogue from there.
So is it like, are each three of us kind of doing our own little bit for 10 minutes, or is it more like a?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. But
okay, yeah.
If there's any overlap,
yeah,
that's fine. Yeah.
And then if anyone's got any questions or anything to talk about as well, we have a Q&A at the end. So ask away and either pop your questions down here or unmute your mic at the end. But other than that, David, maybe we can probably start soon as well.
Let's say 7:05.
Yeah.
And yeah, more people can start joining.
Yeah, I've got a few slides to show you guys too. I prepared a couple of quick slides, so hopefully that'll be interesting for everyone.
Fantastic. Sorry, Ivy, were you saying something? Yeah.
I've also got a few slides, mostly talking about my portfolio and stuff. I'm assuming that Jared and Celine are like more talking about working in a firm. So
for anyone here who hasn't seen Ivy's work, it is absolutely gorgeous. I'm sure you will see it all over Instagram. She is really good at it. And Ivy was our old graphics head of graphics in Archsoc last year. 7. And for anyone who just joined as well, on the chat there's also the sign up sheet. That's all right, guys, just clicking on that.
Yeah, Gene, I was chatting away with you earlier this week, and I think it's really great you guys organising these things. I remember when I was a student a few years ago now, I organised a couple of architecture tours where we went and visited pieces of architecture, and that was really a fantastic experience.
Oh, David, we wanted to do that this year.
We tried.
We tried. We wanted to do an architecture tour this year, and it just kept getting delayed because there's like outbreaks here, outbreaks there, and then there was a good period, and then all of a sudden there wasn't. So it was a bit hard, but we really wanted to do an architecture tour and kind of talking about how to analyze buildings as like precedents and stuff as well this year. And, you know, hopefully that's something that can be canon next year or perhaps later in the year. But, you know, like I said as well, we did plan for more social events for everyone here, but, you know, we'll try to, I guess, make do with what we have now, given the kind of conditions we're under. Other than that, David, it's 7:05. Do you want to?
Yeah, so for everyone here, welcome to UNSW Architecture Society's career talk. We hope everyone has been going well. as we head into week 9 and taking care of themselves during lockdown. Before we get started, if you haven't already, I'm just going to quickly put in the attendance form. That's just for ARC, so you can log your attendance for us. And today, basically, we're building on from week 7 and talking more about the career pathways, more specifically what happens in architecture firms. We have Jesse as our architect, and also some student perspectives on what it's kind of like coming straight after architecture school. If you do have any questions throughout the event, we will be doing a Q&A about an hour after all the presentations are done. So feel free to take the opportunity to write your questions in the chat, and hopefully we can get some nice discussions and answers going on. But other than that, I'll just hand off to Tracy to introduce Jesse, and we can get started.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce Jesse, who's the director and leading architect of his firm, Lockhart Krause Architects. It's in Bondi. You might have seen him around UNSW. He's also a tutor. A lot of his work focuses on designing for the community. And yeah, Jesse, you'd like to take it away, show your slides.
Sounds great, Tracy. Thanks a lot for that introduction. It's really nice to be here, guys. As I was saying, back when I was a student, it was great to kind of try and get involved in things, and I congratulate you guys on organising this event. It's really good for yourselves to kind of get involved and learn things when you're kind of working together, and it's really useful for the other students as well. So well done. I'm going to show a couple of quick slides, and hopefully that's provocative for you guys to get you thinking. And then Hal, who is a UNSW student and who's currently working for me, I was just going to ask him a couple of quick questions. So that should be fun as well. So let me just share my screen here. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. All right. So what I'm going to kind of show you today is really kind of about the journey of architecture. So, architecture is really a personal journey, and everyone has a different path. And I think it's kind of really important for all of you to think about, what inspires you. Where do you want to go with your architectural career? So that's what the talk is about, and I'm going to talk about some of my personal experiences and where why I've got to where I am now. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you guys. So I'm just going to kick it off at the beginning here, kind of with some of my life experience and my personal journey. So as a child, I grew up around my mum and dad working in a family book and picture shop. So business has always been part of my life. It's just interesting reflecting on these things because it does have an impact on your career. So I think from this, I was working in the bookshop from a very early age, around 14, 15, 16. And since then, I think without potentially knowing it, similar to my mum and dad, I've always wanted to have my own business. So they had their own businesses all the way through my childhood. And so I think being around them really inspired me to want to have my own practice. So that's where that kind of that inspiration came from. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, it makes sense. Those drawings are also really beautiful, guys. Just keep an eye out for those as well.
Yeah. Just a quick sketch there. Sometimes it can help, So often I was there in the bookshop selling books to the community and interacting with a lot of different people. It has a big impact on you, actually. And so I'm very comfortable talking to all different kinds of people, The local guy down there in the corner is working as a security guard, as well as like last week I had a meeting with the mayor. So it's interesting how these kind of childhood experiences have a big impact on the way you interact with people. So it's just good to reflect on that and be aware of it. Okay, moving on here. So I'll just kind of run through some of my work experience and the professional journey that I've gone through. So I'm really happy for you guys to jump in here and ask any questions if you feel comfortable. It's very welcome if anyone's got a question. So I think at the beginning of when I was quite young, after my undergraduate degree, I went and worked for an architect named Gabriel Poole. He had quite a small practice of about 5 people, and that was about 15 years ago now. So that was a really great experience, I think, at the beginning of my career, to be in a small practice that allowed me kind of very personal experiences with the client, with the architects. I was actually drawing by hand at that point. It was just the beginning of computers. Oh, well, not the beginning, but, there was still kind of mixed media going on at that time. So having that kind of very intimate experience of a small practice, I think that was a really positive opportunity. So it's always interesting just thinking about, after you guys graduate, where do you want to go? What's the best place for you to kind of start out? Sometimes a big firm, you can be pigeonholed in a big firm. You can do one task and you can kind of consistently do that one task over and over. So a little bit of advice, if it's possible, try and work perhaps for a smaller firm so you get a more diverse experience. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on that? Okay, I'll move on to the next thing. So after Gabriel Poole's office, I then went to Sydney and worked for Drew Heath, who is an architect and carpenter. So I was actually working on a building site with my bare hands, building a series of houses. I built a house in Maroubra and one up in the Blue Mountains. So that was quite a different experience, where it was really about the craft of architecture. How do you actually craft a building and build it? So Drew Heath, he's really inspired by that process of architectural craft. How you put together a piece of timber, or how do you actually build a concrete wall. So that was a very different experience, where it was very physical on a building site. That was also very challenging. At times, it was very difficult. Being a labourer, I was just a labourer, so someone who just kind of does the odd jobs. But it was a wonderful experience to understand how a building was actually built. And so I think I learned a lot through that process. So that was another valuable experience. So hopefully these guys just hearing about my kind of past, it might prompt you to start to think about where you might want to lead with your career. Is that making sense, guys?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, great. So after working for Drew Heath on a building site, I went back and finished my master's degree. I actually did my master's at Newcastle University, just north of Sydney. And after finishing my master's, I went and started to work for some larger scale commercial architecture firms, including FJMT and BVN. They're big commercial practices. They're very high quality. They do fantastic work, but there are over 100 people in the office. So I think being in that environment, I was very lucky that I had those kind of personal experiences at the beginning of my career, so that I could go into that place and be efficient and be practical and be able to deliver what I needed to deliver, and not be pigeonholed. So I was able to kind of get different experiences on many different projects. But I never made the coffee or kind of answered the telephone. So yeah, that was a really great experience, being in a commercial practice where you're working on libraries, or you're working on large scale, say, civic projects, or I did a building at Sydney University. Amazing experience when you're on a building site, seeing things like that actually get constructed. After that, whilst I was working for BVN, they sent me over to a place called Azerbaijan, which is a country it's kind of just below Russia in the Middle East. And that was an amazing experience. I was working on some stadiums there. And whilst I was there, I met someone who had just returned from Foster & Partners office in London. So Foster & Partners is probably one of the most kind of prestigious practices in the entire world. It'd be kind of right up there in the top 10. So that was an amazing opportunity to meet someone. And I said, would you mind giving me a recommendation? And he was nice enough to do that, which allowed me to have an interview in London. So I flew from Azerbaijan to London at my own cost. I thought I'll do anything to get a job here. I had an interview with one of the senior partners, and it went really well. And I thought, wow, this is an amazing opportunity to work in London for Foster & Partners office. They've got 1,200 people there in London. It's a huge campus of people, and from all different cultures. So that was a really intense experience working Foster and Partners office. You work very long hours, but you learn an incredible amount. So I was there for 2 years working there. So I guess, it's kind of this little story, kind of starting off in the family shop with my family, working for a smaller practice here in 2006, and then in the end starting to work for some very large practices, including Norman Foster in London. One of the things I'd really provoke you guys to do, as you're doing tonight, get involved in things, seek out experiences, try and learn as much as you can. Working and traveling and studying, it's all fantastic. So, everything is possible, guys. Get out there and see what you can do. I remember I was so nervous when I went to work for Norman Foster. I thought this is going to be a nightmare, but it was tough. But everything is possible. I survived that experience and I learned a lot through the process. Is that helpful, guys?
Yes.
Yep. Any questions on that?
Not a question, but I think that's a really good point. As you guys can see, what Jesse's doing here is I guess always questioning, what's next, and not really just jumping into the big thing, but kind of taking the steps and gradually exploring different, I guess, aspects of architecture and building yourself up to the next bigger thing. I think that's a really good point there.
Yeah, and I think probably the key to find that pathway, and that's a really good comment, is just to understand what inspires you. What are you really excited about? Are you passionate about sport, or are you passionate about dancing, or are you passionate about the community, or small scale intimate architecture with families, or you're really excited by airports, or there's many different ways you can go with your career. So seeking out opportunities with the right kind of people will lead to future opportunities that kind of are moving you in the right direction. If you go work for a practice that's maybe not quite suited to you, it might lead to something else that doesn't suit you either. So it's good to just be aware of, who you're going to work for, and you really want to work for someone who's really inspiring and you're going to learn a lot from. So coming back to kind of me returning to Australia and starting my own practice after being in London, in the cold and the rain, I was really searching for the sun. So I came back to Australia and moved to the seaside in Bondi. And I joined Bondi Surf Club as a volunteer lifesaver. I love being down there on the beach and helping people, protecting people in the water. It's a wonderful volunteer role to have. So I guess one of the things I kind of wanted to explain to you guys is about getting involved in the community or getting involved in things that you're passionate about. I really believe in the power of positivity. I think if you contribute out there in the community or at university with these kind of talks or wherever you can, if you contribute positively and you contribute your energy, you'll receive that in return. So you never know where things might lead. Get out there, do things, get involved, and you never know, you might get a wonderful opportunity. So around this time, about 5 years ago, I returned to Australia, and I wanted to start my practice, and that was really on the back of a boutique hotel in Tasmania. So there was a client who asked me to design this for him, and I actually met him through a basketball competition. So he was the manager of my basketball competition, and so it's really, I guess that reinforces the point that be aware of your community, be aware of the people that are around you, because those people often have a big influence on your opportunities. So support the people around you, and they'll support you. I think that's a really important lesson, and that's significantly kind of impacted on my career. So I went and joined Bondi Surf Club as a volunteer lifesaver, and without kind of expecting it, I got the opportunity to bid for Bondi Surf Club conservation and upgrade, the upgrade of the surf club there, and it's actually the oldest surf lifesaving club in the world. So it's really interesting. You contribute, as a volunteer, and opportunities can arise. It's very interesting. So I began began designing Bondi Surf Club. It's a really exciting public project down on Bondi Beach next to the Bondi Pavilion. This is the building here. It's very respectful of the heritage of that place, the context. It includes a courtyard, a publicly accessible courtyard, similar to the pavilion. The pavilion is a courtyard building. There's a courtyard here, and it's really about making sure the building respects the context in that place. So that's a really exciting project we're working on at the moment, and we're very fortunate that the project's received overwhelming support from the community. 95% of the community saying yes to the proposal, which is an incredible achievement. And recently we had 0 negative responses to the DA. So for a public project of this nature, very, very public, it's an international icon, Bondi Beach, receiving 0 negative responses is incredible. And we really achieved that by talking to the community, getting involved with them, explaining things logically, practically, so they could understand why we were doing what we're doing. Taking the time to speak with all the stakeholders, everyone involved, really made our journey through the approvals process with council much more achievable and possible. There's other projects on the coastline, very similar in nature, have really approached it in a different way, and they've received very negative commentary from the community, and it's really made the project very difficult for those clients. So hopefully that's helpful. Get out there, guys, contribute, and you never know what opportunities might become available. So just to summarise here, about my personal background was really in commercial business. Growing up alongside my mum and dad, working in our family shop. And for me, kind of a personal thing about contributing to the community is something that really inspires me. And so that's really shaped the way my practice does business. My practice specialises in community-based commercial architecture. And we're really about adding value and building a stronger community. So as I was saying, architecture is really a personal journey. All of us have a different path. And, if you kind of remember anything from this talk, I'd really like you to think about what inspires you, and please seek out those kind of opportunities. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. That was wonderful. And that's a really nice pond there, drawing communities together. Yeah.
That's architects it's a powerful tool that architects have. The ability to draw, the ability to make models, and so kind of the sense of architects drawing a community together. That's what we focused on.
Oh, that's
okay. So here comes the fun part. Tracy, you ready?
This is so cute. I'm going to screenshot this. Okay.
Yeah, so I've worked with a number of UNSW students, including Hal and Tracy, who are here tonight. And, I was very fortunate to tutor them there at the university. And I was just Hal was actually now working for me in a permanent part-time role. And I thought I might ask Hal just a couple of quick questions to help you guys understand what it's like working in an architecture firm. Does that sound okay?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, Hal, are you ready?
Yep.
So I've just got 3 quick questions here. So Hal, what was the job interview like?
So the job interview, what I thought is not that it was more relaxed than what I think. Jesse gives me at the first time. Jesse gives me an opportunity to have an interview in Celine, which was a really cool, and they did a lot of practice. And yeah, they did. I think they designed the Singapore Facebook, and then I've been to there, and I forgot the time. So it should be. I think it should be 11 a.m. and then I remember it's 3 p.m. and then I lose that. And then I'm really thank you for JC and the workers in Celine. They gave me another chance to have another interview, but unfortunately they don't want any like part-time job anymore. They just want they just want the full times. So unfortunately I won't be able to work there. But after that, Jesse gives me an opportunity to work for him. I think probably, I don't have any interview from Jesse actually. Yeah, because I'm always chatting, talking to Jesse, and then one day he said, "Oh, I like you positive. I like your attitude to working. So if you want to work for me, I will be ready." Yeah, Jesse said that, and I said, "Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm really happy to work for you."
I remember how we had a little bit of a small interview. It was here in the office at my desk, and I remember you asking me the question, what tasks will I be doing in the office? And you said, will I be making the coffee and cleaning the toilets? And I thought that was really nice, So I thought I'd ask you how, what tasks are you doing in the office and here in the office at the moment?
So what I did right now is Jesse gives me the task to doing the development application for a small residential project now. So it was quite challenged to use some like new software to like, you want that. So what you think is that, but you don't have that like opportunity to do what you want because you don't know how to use the software. But thank you so much, Jesse, to helping me for the ArchiCAD. So it's basically like what Revit did. So it's kind of the same thing. So this is what we did right now. And Jesse gives me a lot of correction, like to change that, to remove that, to redo that things. And this is what I did for like a few weeks. Yeah. Hope you can see that. Like Jesse want me to, this one is not good. Make this one a little bit bigger. And notes task here. Yeah. And what I really learned is like how to do like a real studio. Like we are doing the studio in our school, so we got so many studios. But with working for Jesse, I will like, yes, the same as the studio, but it's more reality. So you might see like your project has been built and your project has been progressed. Like I could see like Jesse is like negotiating to like every single group, like the client, like the government, like the local council, or any people like to talking about how to make the development progress. And then what I think the most valuable that I learned is the first task is to how to read and survey. So this is the survey. This is the actual survey. It's not what we thought what we did on the construction project. That one is too simple. And I don't know what those kind of things is. Like they got the legend here. So I need to read that. Where is the parapet? Where is the rooftop? Where is the window? Like there are so many things to learn and to remember.
Thanks, Al. That's great. So no making coffee so far? just kidding. It's I think, as I was saying, guys, working in a small practice, you really do get these kind of opportunities to learn everything. And Tracy, I remember you came along to one of the client meetings that I had for the Bondi Surf Club project, and how I was there as well, experiencing what it's like to present a piece of architecture in a meeting. What was that like for you, Tracy? Was that interesting?
Oh yeah, it was really interesting to see like what goes on behind the scenes and the hard work you put into it.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Yeah. So I had a lot of architecture models that I was showing the client. I find they're really valuable, and clients really understand what a piece of architecture is when you show them something physical. It's much easier for them to understand that.
Jesse, do you make those models in your practice or get them professionally made?
Yeah, yep. No, we make them here. So Tracy, which part of this did you make? You made it. You made a bunch of things, and Hal was in there with the tweezers and the people.
I chipped off a bit on the edge. That was my
that's right.
contribution.
You're working on this
Don't
part
tell
here.
him that.
You're
No,
working this
I was
part
meant
here.
to. That was like I was meant to chip it off. I didn't break it.
Oh, I was gonna say.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You know, everyone, you contribute to something like this, and you know, it's going to be around for a long time. So it's a great opportunity. Oh yeah,
I
Hal's got
spray
something.
painted.
Hal was the spray painter. Yep. So, you know, yeah, it's great. It's great to get involved. So, you know, Hal's working on models. We make a lot of models in the practice. I might quickly show you this, guys. This is just another little model here. You know, this is a 1:1000 model I did right at the beginning of the process, and that helped me to secure the Bondi Surf Club project. Do we have time just for me to go through this for 30 seconds, David?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
It's very interesting.
So this is the Bondi Surf Club here, and what has happened over time, there's a series of additions have been added to the original heritage building, which was built in 1934. And so the building started to become kind of unclear in its origin. So what we were looking at doing, this model was actually like a little kind of a block model to explain to the client the thinking process, the kind of logic behind the design. So I can clip in this second option here. So this was actually the architect before me. That was his proposal. So basically what he was doing was he was taking the footprint of those intrusive additions, the additions that had been added to the back of the building, and making it into a 2-story building. So kind of it was just you know, reiterating the original problem. You know, you're really dominating the original building so that the heritage building can't be understood. So, you know, as university students, you might consider doing some really rough models like this in your first design presentation. So we started to look at, okay, how do we start to respect the original heritage building? We were looking at a smaller building at the rear there, you know, not dominating the original. And then we took that idea further and thought, okay, what if we take that mass and actually bring it off the back of the building? And here, so this becomes the option, and you start to get this really exciting publicly accessible courtyard here in the centre between the heritage building and the new building at the rear. And so when you started to look at the context and the buildings that surround the surf club, the Bondi Pavilion is actually a courtyard building. And if you look further abroad, Bondi Beach Public School up here at the top is another courtyard building. And so this kind of little massing models really started to reveal what might be appropriate for that context. And so the project really became about this idea of a building about courtyards. And the reason these old buildings, these old heritage buildings have courtyards is because they face directly onto the beach south. And so it's about providing a protected place for the community to gather. And so that's what we're doing here with our project, providing a protected place for the community to gather. So it's interesting how models can really impact the thinking process. So you can see in this model, which is much larger, that courtyard's still there. It's a publicly accessible courtyard that everyone can access, and that'll be an amazing place to have a picnic lunch, and kids can have fun in there. So you can see from a 1:1000 model, you know, up to here a 1:200 model, that process that happens, and the process of thinking. So, you know, I think I was talking to David earlier about one of the other tutors and the way that he thinks about architecture. For me, it's really about the power of big ideas and how that's connected to people and place. So, you know, that's just something that I'm passionate about, and you know, it'll be interesting with your own architectural experiences with different tutors, learning different things and finding the kind of way that helps you to design a building. I've got one last question here for Hao. And so the last question is, why do you think you got the job?
Because I can clean the toilet?
No. Not at all, no.
I think, yeah, it's just the right place, meet right people. Like, I love to have conversation with the tutors to ask them, like, the opinions. I think when we was in the first year, I think Xiaowen said, like you might have a job from your tutor. I thought it was, oh, just kidding. No, why can't I get a job from tutor? But yeah, it's become to the real. Like I'm working for JC for 2 months already, and to say how can I get the job from JC? I really think like Jesse has said like your positive altitude could be your opportunity. I think Jesse always said like, yeah, you need to grab your own opportunity. So when you like meet some people, like you need to have good conversation and talking to them, understand what they want, understand, and to just for me is just I want to grab every chance I could. Like Jesse gives me this chance, so I'll say yes. And I'm really thank you for Jesse, and really thank you for David for holding this such good event. Yeah, always got this kind of always attend those kind of event, meet people, meet architect, like maybe you can visit the site and talking to the workers there, talking to the like construction workers there, and talking to them how the beams goes, how those kind of things connect each other. Like you can get like the chance. You can get a chance. You need to grab your own chance.
Thank you, Hal.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Jesse and Hal. That was really inspiring, actually. I think a big thing about Jesse is that he always tells you to never say no to a good opportunity. So, Jesse and Hal met through studio, and maybe that's something that you guys can, work towards. Because you might through your experiences at uni particularly, you might run into these people who can give you these opportunities, and it's this interaction with them that will give you those opportunities. You can never pass those over because you might end up somewhere like where Hal is. I think it was really nice to hear what your journey was and your experiences and how we can branch off of that in our own lives as well. So I'd like to pass on to David.
So thank you so much, Jesse. Before we go into a more grounded level with our past Archsoc execs, Jared, Ivy, and Celine, I wanted to ask a question, a segue question, just to get everyone thinking for the Q&A later on. You put a very big emphasis on personal journeys, and of course, if an individual, how someone gets from point A to B can be very different for everyone. And I think this applies to all of us right now. What can you say to someone, especially with the given circumstances with the pandemic, who could be having doubts about architecture? What could you say to them to kind of...
Is that a question for me, Dave? I'd love to answer that question.
Yeah, for sure, Jesse.
Yeah, great. I think it's really important to reflect, guys, that I remember being in first year and having no idea at all what about architecture was. I remember just feeling totally lost. And it was really a huge burden. You're kind of doing a course and you're not really clear about what direction you're going in. So that feeling that way is not unusual. It was the same for me. I'm sure it's the same for many of your colleagues. So don't feel like you're alone in that position. It's not the case at all. And so often this pathway is not necessarily clear. It's something that I'm still thinking about and trying to understand. So that the pathway is never really obvious. It might be a little bit more obvious when you're looking back, which I'm kind of starting to do. But I think the key thing there is just to clarify that everything is possible, David. Perhaps you might have some doubts, and the best architects in the world. I talk to other architects who have huge practices of over 100 people, and they have doubts as well. And I remember when there was an architect that said that to me, Angelo Candelapis said that to me, and I felt a great relief. I felt a great sense of relief because we all have doubts, and that's okay. And so give it some time, David, and keep moving forward, and everything will be okay. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's helpful, and hopefully that applies to some people going through. this
So guys,
lockdown.
make sure to drop any questions on the chat as well, and we'll have the Q&A at the end. I know a lot of us have questions about, I guess, employment as well for Jesse. So you have any of those, just chuck them in the chat or our socials as well, and we'll read them at the end as well.
Yeah. So Jared, Ivy, and is Celine here?
Celine is here somewhere.
Yep. Hi.
Hey,
All right.
Hello.
Hello, hello. You guys want to introduce Celine, Jared, and Ivy as well? Celine,
So
hello.
these guys were our past Archsoc execs last year. And the society wouldn't be here today without them. And after they graduated last year, we thought it'd be really good for them to come back and kind of talk about how they got into what they're doing today, which is kind of working as at a firm just before they do their masters. Yeah, just taking a break from studies and just how they got there. So if we could say maybe start with Ivy.
Yep. I've just got a few slides to share. All right. Is it sharing for you guys? Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yep. All right, cool. So, hi everybody. Just introducing myself. My name's Ivy, and I recently completed my 3 years of Bachelor of Architecture last year. And I'm currently working full time. Really loving architecture, find it a really fulfilling degree, and I really loved and enjoyed my time at UNSW. Undergrad was a really fun time. Yeah, and would love to share my love for architecture. So I've been incredibly fortunate to have had the opportunity to work at Studio Hohenstein, which is a firm here located near Redfern. And they're most notably known for Green Square Library and more like larger civic projects. And Green Square Library, which some of you might have seen, isn't too far away from UNSW. And it's a really cool project, so definitely check it out. I've been working here at Studio Hohenstein for just over a year now. I started there working part-time halfway through my 3rd year, and then I transitioned into full-time at the beginning of this year. So I have a solid 6 months, so I'm pretty fresh into like the whole architecture thing. Oh, sorry. So I've been loving working here so far, and I've been learning so much. So yeah. And I've been gaining such a huge insight into the world of architecture. Life as an architectural assistant, I probably won't talk too much about in this presentation. I'm guessing Jared and Celine will be talking about this a bit more. But I'm assisting with all sorts of projects, assisting about the office with like basic drawings. And right now I'm currently assisting with a tender for a library. So that's pretty fun. I've been working on things like Rhino and Revit and a whole bunch of programs. So yeah, been an amazing time. However, with my presentation today, I'm going to be talking more about my portfolio. Don't know if you guys can see me right now, but I'm holding up my little portfolio up here right now. So yeah, so this is basically your best work condensed. The purpose of this is that you can see your potential employer can see who you are and your skills, basically. And it's so important for us in the architecture and creative industries in general, because this is what sells you as a person with your skills. Getting a job, I know, is very intimidating at first, especially when you're in your undergrad years. But I feel like in your undergrad years, you should be thinking about upskilling yourself, learning as much as you can, putting yourself out there, and never saying no to an opportunity, and learning as much as you can. However, just with some tips with getting jobs, obviously a lot of people do a lot of like cold calling and emailing, which yes, you can do, but a lot of the times people get their jobs from just connections. And again, maybe you might get lucky, you might be approached by your tutor or lecturer. I myself got pretty lucky. I was approached through my Instagram, where I have all of my work posted. So it's in a way is my public portfolio. So yeah, this portfolio that I'm going to be presenting today is basically something that has been worked on for quite a long time. I started my portfolio probably during mid-second year, and it's progressed to what it is today. And it's gone through so many evolutions as I just make it better and better. So starting a portfolio, I've got a little flick through that I made of my book. I think it's a little fun and interesting thing. So yeah, starting your portfolio, it should be clear and concise. Obviously, it takes time. There's so many revisions, and you're changing it all the time. Some tips that I would think about if you're really intimidated about starting a portfolio are things about like how will it look at the end? So perhaps even like size of the pages, how it will look on screen for your potential employer, and also thinking about like fonts and like making everything really interesting sitting on the page. So yeah, the end result should be beautiful. Treat your portfolio as like an extension of you, but also like packaged really concisely. Working with friends really helps as well. I was always showing my friends my work, and they were telling me how I would improve it. So I've got my contents page on here on the screen. So just some tips is not to make it too long, probably about 5 pages max, not what I've done here. I've got 8, so that's a bit too much. Definitely keep it concise. Keep your best projects at the front, and they should really show a range of types of projects, such as like larger like civic projects maybe that you've worked on in studio, down to like smaller residential, so that it shows that you've got a really diverse skill set. And it should show like as many skills as you can. For me, I'd had a lot of model making, hand drawing, CAD skills, maybe photography and a bit of art, for example. Yeah. For the resume, this is also, I found this quite intimidating as an undergrad. So obviously you've got your basic info, your software skills and everything. But I think the hardest bit for me was thinking about achievements and competitions and what to put in there. So that's that little bottom right-hand corner there. So this is the part where what Jessie talked about with not saying no to opportunities, and putting yourself out there and broadening your skills as much as possible. So what I did in my undergrad was participated in as many things as possible. So I really put myself out there and kept my eye out on things like SONA, which is the Student Organization Network for architecture, and other external competitions like a Super Studio and Young Architects competition. I participated at the Future Spaces Foundation at the beginning of last year. And because of that, and Celine did too, and because of that, we were able to meet so many people and get a lot of connections as well from that. So being involved with the architecture community and all of these people that you meet, you might eventually work with them, which is really important. So yeah, all of those experiences that you get really go into this resume. Yeah. I'm just gonna now flick through some pages of my portfolio. So I was very fortunate to work with Sarah Pearson, who unfortunately isn't here tonight, with these projects. So here I've got my Studio 5 from the beginning of last year, and I'm showing a range of skills that I've put into my portfolio. So I've got my large model, I've got some hand drawing and a bit of CAD and Photoshop work. And also you can think about putting in a little summary and the kinds of software that you use, so that people know that what skills you've put into this project. And just flicking through, I've got some diagrams as well. Notice that I've, in the pages, I've made them quite simple and clear so that your eye knows exactly what to jump to. Looking at other people's portfolios, I've often noticed that people cram their pages in a bit too much, so it becomes quite busy. If you keep it simple, keep it nice, that will definitely impress your potential employer. Yeah. And just a few more things like construction and understanding how circulation works is really important too. And a bit more of my Studio 6 work as well, again with rendering and more model making and photoshopping work. And I think it's just as important to have other kinds of skills. So for me, I learned a bit of Grasshopper in one of my studios in 2019, and yeah, it proves that I can learn a whole bunch of skills. And also just a bit of art at the end, which a lot of people might do, like photography or different kinds of artistic skills. Yes. And finally, we've got how you're going to present your portfolio. Obviously, when you go into your meeting, you're probably going to bring something in to talk about. And I often found for my meetings, sometimes it might be more casual, as Jesse and Hal talked about. And sometimes it might be a bit more formal, where you might bring a little book in and talk through yourself and things that you've done. Yeah, and that's about it for today. Thanks, guys.
That was great, Ivy.
Thanks, Ivy.
Really good. If I might just comment on something there.
Yep. No.
I think one of the architects' most powerful tools is the ability to draw and make models, as I was saying, the ability to communicate. And so I think Ivy's example there of a really powerful, clear message in her portfolio, that translates to practice as well. So you might be doing that as a student trying to get a job, but me, every day, I try and do drawings that clearly articulate something to the client so that I can convince them that this is the right thing to build. To get a building built is incredibly difficult. It's so hard. And to achieve that, you have to have really powerful drawings and models so that you can actually achieve that aim. So drawing is a very powerful tool, guys, as Ivy has done. Just keep working away to make that knife really, really sharp, and it'll allow you to succeed in the future.
I think that's a really good point. I think it depends. You might be a really good model maker, you might be a good drawer. I know Ivy, I think you used to teach art. If that's correct. So I know Ivy's really good at drawing. So using your skills to kind of sell your work. It might be photography, it might be rendering, Lumion. I know someone else who's really good at, I guess, making visualizations and renders. So if that's your strong suit, then just play that. So play with the cards that you've got as well, guys. Don't just kind of limit yourself, and make your portfolio, like Ivy said, personal. And I guess think about how you can best sell what you're good at and what your style of work is. And that leads back to what Jesse said about knowing what your passion is and your underlying core. So yeah, David, passing it back to you.
Yes, thanks, Ivy. Your work's always really inspiring to look at. Jared, Celine, do you guys mind talking about your experiences working at a firm? I think you guys are in similar places, so I think it would be good to have kind of like a dialogue there.
Yeah, sure. I think probably Celine and I will probably echo and reflect a lot of what's already been said tonight in terms of our experiences. I don't know about you, Celine, but for me, I wanted to just share, similar to Jesse, just my journey and the steps that led to where I am at the moment. I wanted to detail a little bit about what I do at my practice and my role, and then also how that kind of changed my perspective while studying at UNSW, and how that reflected with my work. So I currently work at a practice called Architecture Savile Isaacs, and they are a a local firm based in North Sydney that do boutique and luxury residential and multi-res work, so quite specific. But the way that I kind of got there was, again, I took every opportunity and network in my vicinity that I could. So when I was in year 10, I did work experience, and we knew someone from my synagogue who luckily had me just for that 1 week. And he said to me, you know, if you're studying architecture in uni, then come back to me and we'll see if we can do something for you. So fortunately, even when I was halfway through first year, I contacted him and was able to just do 1 day a week kind of paid internship at his practice, which was fantastic experience. Looking back now, I realized that the work that I was doing it was very, very basic. I was kind of in the corner computer. I had a few people around me who were helping out. It was a medium-sized practice, around 10 people. They did a whole variety of work, a lot of high-rise out in Parramatta and Western Sydney, actually. But it was just 1 day a week, but I was just playing around on ArchiCAD most of the day, doing some basic massing and modeling, sorting through their materials catalog, getting rid of a lot of stuff. And then eventually they moved offices, so I was helping them schlep a lot of stuff back and forth. I was the coffee boy. But I was in the environment and I was absorbing it all, and I got to see behind the scenes of a lot of these projects. I got to see the inner workings, even though I didn't necessarily understand all of it. So that was kind of like my first foot in the door. Unfortunately, work kind of dried up mid second year with that, and as they go through waves of work. And my next stage was my family knew someone from my high school, so my brother's friend's family. So there you go, a personal connection, and that's the place that I'm working at currently. The way that started was they are a much smaller firm, so only 5 people, and they had a couple people leave them. So I was fortunate that I was at the right place at the right time. They needed a spare pair of hands. I had some very, very rudimentary Revit skills after that BIM course that we studied. So that was extremely helpful actually in getting me started. And over time, you learn so much when you're in the environment. I was very fortunate that I got to sit next to some coworkers. I was pestering them all the time. How do I do this? How do I do that? Googling half the time so I don't have to annoy them. But it's a learning process, and you learn on the job basically. So you get as much as you can from uni, and then once you get into the office, you fly away. Some of the stuff that I work on specifically, and my role, I'm essentially a drafts person. So my boss, who is the main designer of the 6 to 7 active projects that we have at a time, will draft up something. He will sketch something, and I will CAD that in Revit. So we use Revit primarily. Before that, when a project is starting, I may be setting up the templates or using the templates to set up a project. We will take all the information from council, so they have all these different regulations and controls. We have to summarize them and package them to see what we can actually do, see what the client needs. We'll have a kind of pre-designed stage and presentations that I will help put together. So mood boards, precedents, lots of images, and then luckily I get to be a part of those client meetings where we're trying to guide them in a direction to sell them our idea or help them understand our idea, get their feedback and see what direction we want to push project. Eventually then, once you start putting a DA together, like how is, it's more CAD work, more requirements from the council, putting a documentation set together. And so I know the frustration of putting a DA together. We've just recently submitted one. Lots of back and forths, especially with other consultants that are required for this process. So things like a landscape or a geotech or a structural engineer, a town planner who has to do reports for you on how you impact the neighbours. You may need a view consultant. We work with a lot of really high-end properties on very steeply sloping sites near beaches, and when you're putting up a new building that may block a neighbour behind you, they can get very upset about that. There can be lots of drama involved. So you may need a view consultant to help you with that. And then they need all these different reports and documents, lots of emails, back and forths and meetings. And so part of my role is for particular projects or specific projects, managing all those consultants, keeping track of all of them, also payments and the clients, those sorts of things going back and forth. So a lot of responsibility. Additionally, in different stages presentations, I also get to do Photoshop renders, which is something I always really enjoyed. So that's a skill directly from uni, which I was able to take into the firm and kind of push a little bit more of, and that's actually significantly helped our clients with their understanding of a particular project. So we do more of that as compared to making models. That's not something that we do. Every practice has their kind of way of working. But essentially, being in that environment. So for context, I started there towards the end of 2019, part-time while I was still at uni. And then this year I went full-time. So I finished my bachelor's last year, went full-time this year. And for me, I enjoyed that work environment so much. That's part of the reason why I wanted to take a break from studying, to just kind of really dive deep into this world and to be able to see more. One thing, especially working part-time, that helped me while I was studying at uni is to see the similarities and differences between these two worlds, the academic uni world and the real world of architecture in an office. Obviously at uni, you don't have as many restrictions. You have very creative projects. You have an opportunity to really explore, do something crazy, something you probably can't do in the real world. And that's where you can really have a lot of fun. As compared to the real world, you're absorbing a lot more technicalities, a lot more controls. It's all very interesting as well, sometimes a little bit dry, but it gives you an appreciation for kind of like the differences. For me as well, it helped reduce my stress and expectations for overworking myself at uni. I find that a lot of the times there's a huge amount of pressure to be able to put, insane renders, drawings, whatever it is. And sometimes we may overwork ourselves and have all-nighters, and it is part of the academic uni architecture world. And it's a lot of fun in its own right. However, you can only really do that for so long before it can take a toll. And I think it's really important that, so for me, when I started working, I realized there's so much more in the real world that can be done, and it's so different. What is the point of killing myself over these? And I think having a healthy work-life leisure balance is really important. So architecture has to be a passion. And even at some firms, like Jesse was saying, at one of those firms, lots of late nights. And I think there is credit there where credit's due. But for me, especially, I think it's not something that I want to kill myself over necessarily. I want to be alive to do it. So finding a way that you can be extremely passionate and loving of this world and work, and finding a way to do that economically and sustainably as well, I think is really important. But that was just a quick kind of just my general experience. A lot of things I think have already been said tonight in terms of taking the opportunities that you can, putting yourself out there. But for me, just adding to try your best not to stress about it, and that things will be okay, and that if you work hard and you take it one step at a time and see where your future will be great, especially if you're passionate. But yes, Celine, what is kind of your experience on that end?
I think I'll try to keep it short because I'm aware that we are running a little bit behind schedule. But I will try my best to not repeat too many things that have been said. So I may have taken a little bit of a different route with everyone that has spoken tonight. So just a recap, I was the co-president of the Architecture Society from 2018 to 2020. So I mostly focused in uni, actually trying my best to build up the architecture community, which at the time didn't quite exist. Though design and, aesthetic and critical thinking is very, very important to the trade. Like everyone has mentioned, it is very important actually to continue to build up your network and to, design is an ever evolving skill, and it's important to sort of keep in touch with your peers and the greater community to keep educating yourself outside of university. So I feel that in uni, we learned a lot of critical thinking and design concepts, but I was interested in also educating the wider architecture community in terms of what your options are, what kind of materials are available in the industry. And that was kind of what I was concerned with. So I was also the student representative for the Australian Organised Network of Architecture. So that's referred to as SONAR. So I had the pleasure and the opportunity to go to Melbourne and meet with the other representatives and get to know other students from other universities and kind of try and understand, you know, why people go into the architectural field. And that really broadened my mind beyond academics. In regards to where I am now, I am currently working full-time at a practice called Dreamscapes Architects. And actually, it's a little bit different, I suppose, not sure with maybe Ivy and Jared, but we are actually a group. And I think it is quite common that companies will have different branches where they do all things. So with my company, we're kind of like the jack of all trades, where we take you from conception all the way to construction. So we have the architecture branch, which is where I'm part of, and we also have a construction group, and we also do sort of contract administration and sort of, we do from very, very small to very, very big. So I've had a really good opportunity to be a part of a lot of different scales of projects. It could be designing a shop front or a little commercial fit out. It could be helping to design or pick out interior fittings, even from doing little small renovations or a whole entire luxury house, down to maybe a big scale commercial industrial warehouse development. So we've kind of done it all. And I think for me in my position, I'm also a draftsperson similar to Jared. And I think that has really taken, starting a career in architecture really sort of gave me a huge punch in the face, which was what was going on in the real world as to sort of the things that I was doing in university. In a fast-paced environment like my company, it would be projects in the door, projects out the door. There wasn't really much time for concepts. And to be very, very frank, a lot of the clients are more concerned about whether you're able to deliver quickly, get the job done, and save as much money as possible. So that's the other end of the spectrum, which you might not be expecting when you come out of university, unfortunately. You can go to your client and say, this looks great, but look, if it doesn't fit into their budget, you know, the solid wooden door that looks great is not going to cut it. So I think that's kind of the bleakness of architecture that I feel hasn't been quite mentioned, though it is, I think, still very interesting, because I remember in one of my lectures with Paul Hogben, he talks about how the brief is like a bondage to an architect. Sometimes when we think about brief, it could be, you know, like who is living and occupying the space, who is going, how old are they, you know, what will they be doing? These constraints in the real world is, you know, the council, the VCA, your client's budget. And I think what makes architecture interesting to me now in present time is all how you work your design around these very real constraints. So I guess coming out into my career, it's definitely evolved a lot beyond. And I think as a student, it's important to open your mind to these factors. As well as in my role, just like Jared, I am involved in a lot of coordination. So it is, I think that was also very interesting to me, that, you know, architecture from your very narrow point of view, which is, you know, just the small design, turns out to be 10% of like what actually goes on, you know? And, you know, designing to meet all the requirements of all these consultants is also just a whole other league in itself, I think. So I would encourage everyone to actually, you know, maybe just to open your mind to see what other people are involved in a project besides the design stage. So like what Jared has mentioned, you know, designing for access, designing to ensure that the you know, the view consultants are happy, to ensure that the structural engineers are happy, and also to make sure that you do all the research that you can in terms of, you know, whether you've met the SCPP, whether you've met the, you know, yeah, all these things are just very, very interesting and very easily available actually on Google. With my company, I'm at about 10 to 20 people in the office at a time. I would consider that small to medium size. So in my role, I would say that I wear a lot of hats. Sometimes I'm drafting, sometimes I'm doing emails all day. Sometimes I'm talking to the client, and sometimes I'm looking through all the planning reports. So definitely a very, very good experience for me because it's taken me out of the academic. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I think those were like two very nuanced experiences. Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you, guys. I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna like turn it over to the audience. We'll be doing Q&A now. So if anyone
guys,
does
drop your questions, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two here already from earlier today.
Also, David, real quickly. Jesse, did you want to introduce?
Yeah, I don't know if Ben's still here. Mr. Greaves, are you there in the background? Benji? Yeah, I have a colleague.
Hello.
Oh, he's here. He is here.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Ben, how are you?
Yeah, I'm well. How are you? How are you, Jesse?
Fantastic. Did you have any questions or comments there, Ben? Or
just to give people context, I'm a project manager, so I'm architecturally trained. My background, I studied at Newcastle with Jesse. There's a bit of overlap with us. So I'm working with the University of Tasmania in a capacity as a project manager. I think it's important I say that because architecture is a gateway to a lot of other opportunities that students may not necessarily be aware of until they embark on their journey working professionally. Yep. So I appreciate that students want to work for a particular practice or work in a particular aesthetic, but the most important thing is you get work, and good or bad, the most important thing is you try and learn from whatever you're undertaking. So I've done a number of roles working with large architecture practices such as Scott Carver in Sydney, working with a close friend of mine, Ben Pomeroy, who is a principal of Rothwell Lowman in Sydney. I've worked for myself. I've worked on sewage treatment plants, service pits, doing section details for a road and a bridge. I'm currently working on a pier. So what I mean to say is that the sky's the limit for you guys. You're so young, you've got so much energy and enthusiasm. Channel it into your work. Don't worry about maybe trying to get the pedigree architect. That will come with time. If you ask Jesse, he's got to where he is because of methodically, layer by layer, building up his knowledge, his skills, his network. And then from that, he's been able to seize an opportunity to start a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. There may be someone who can defy or, I guess, defy me on that or prove themselves contrary to that. But look, there's always exceptions to the rule. You're all exceptional. Just focus on your work and be methodical. So add layers. Try not to repeat. If you're a good drawer, then maybe consider what your weaknesses are. So try and address using software such as Revit. If you're very good at what you do, but you're not very good socially, then try and go to events. These forums are great. Don't be afraid to ask a question. If you don't want to do it on a video, log it on the side on the chat. Step outside of your comfort zone. The learning doesn't cease when you finish your education. If anything, I would say it starts once you leave uni. Is that enough? Is that what you're going for, Jesse?
Yeah, it was great, Benji. I think similarly, some of the other people that I studied with, one of them became a photographer, a wedding photographer. Another one is now an academic writing books. So, you know, everyone has different pathways, as Benji is saying, you know, so it's exciting. The architecture can lead to many different possibilities. You could become a project manager, a construction manager. There's many different opportunities. Yeah. Thanks, Benji.
Not a problem.
Thank you. I think that's a very common theme for tonight, guys, just like being open to, I guess, not only opportunities, but being honest, not only about your strengths, like I said before, but I guess your weaknesses as well. Maybe, I guess, being open to the idea that from your weaknesses, opportunities can come from that as well, because maybe you end up liking it, or, you know, you end up learning something new completely. And like we said before, just kind of taking the smaller step and asking what's next. If you're not a good drawer yet, just maybe practicing a little bit more, or even not good at talking, like Ben said, join these forums and events and just talk a little bit. And these are skills that kind of contribute to, you know, helping you become a better architect in the future in the long run as well. And you never know who you're going to meet, especially when it comes to employment and networking. So it's good to keep your options open. There's a few questions on the chat as well. And if you guys got any more questions for any of our guests, just pop them down in the question box below, guys. But there is one here.
I'll just quickly interject. We'll also do our best to give Jesse's perspective and the student perspective.
Yeah.
From Ivy, Jared, and Celine with these questions.
So if you guys want to ask about, you know, what it's like to work either in a firm, or I guess what employers would look for, in students, yeah, just make sure to ask them. I think the first question is from Tracy. No, it's not Tracy.
The first one was from Josh.
Josh.
It was for Jesse. He asked what was the biggest reason for leaving a big firm to start your own firm.
That's a good question.
Biggest reason, I think, as I was saying, I had always wanted to have my own practice. There's something in the back of my mind, and so an opportunity came along where I had a project that could support me to begin that opportunity. I think if I had kind of jumped into my own practice without having any projects, that would have been really challenging. You know, you have to be able to pay the bills. So at the time at Norman Foster's office, there was a few projects that were stopping in the studio that I was in, and I thought, okay, well, you know, I've got this great hotel project. How about I jump in there and kind of start my own practice? I think one thing I would say is, for all of you guys out there, don't necessarily try and start your own practice too early, because once you do that, you really can't go back. You know, if I had done anything else, you know, I would probably have gone and worked for some other architects that were really inspirational to me, because in different countries, because you learn so much through those opportunities. Not that I regret it at all. I'm so happy with my own practice. It's an incredible wild ride, you know, with an immense amount of responsibility, but an immense amount of freedom as well. So I really love it, but that's a big decision to make. So just make sure you consider it in the right way, and don't rush it, I would say.
I think it's also really important to note that with Jesse, when we had him as a tutor, he said that, you know, he has his own practice now, but he doesn't stop there. Like I think he's got 5 or 6 people now with How, but he has a goal of 100 people. He wants to increase his firm. So I think that, you know, it doesn't just stop there once you start your own practice. And, you know, you always have bigger, better things to look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Tracy. Yeah.
Next question was from Jamin. It was basically about how lockdown has affected working as a team, about communication and about motivation. So, you know, does anyone?
I think this can be open to everyone that spoke tonight.
I'd like to speak on the motivation. I think it can be quite difficult. I find being in an office environment is a really inspirational environment to be in. It helps me focus. Being around others is such a huge part of the practice of architecture. The transition to online, I guess, I've been quite fortunate. So it's a small team, only 5 of us. So needing to have a dialogue with so many different people is reduced. So that makes it a little bit easier. And it's quite casual, you know, phone calls with the boss here and there, emails back and forth, set lots of markups back and forth, which does slow down the process, you know. So whereas where we were in the office, you could pull someone over, have a look at this, help, and, you know, you get pulled around a bit, but you quite enjoy that. But yeah, motivation is the big one. So for me, you know, I had to move my monitor and desktop down into the dining room, get out of my bedroom, because otherwise there's just too many distractions. It's too easy to have an afternoon nap. But yeah, it is what it is, and you know, you kind of take it as it is and see, you know, where are we lucky, where are we fortunate for how we're being supported, and we live in a technological age where that is possible. So you know, we'll all get through this. I'm sure it's the same with uni, but yeah, that's just been my experience. It's difficult with motivation, but you get there.
Definitely. I think as well, being a junior in my company, I definitely don't know everything. And being in an office environment allows you to, walk over to someone else's desk and say, hey, I don't quite understand this policy. Can you explain it to me? Or if it could be just really quick, you know, feedback, just boom, boom, boom. I don't want a door here, not this size. It's very quick and easy in the office. Whereas when you're at home, sometimes things just cannot progress if you don't have a meeting. Especially with lockdown, I suppose a lot of people with the consultants, they take a lot longer to respond. You can't just call up the office and say, hey, why didn't you looking at your emails? So yeah, that has definitely affected the workflow in that way.
Okay, thank you guys for that answer. The next question is from Amira. I think it is mainly directed to Jesse. It's sort of about how a student can approach a tutor, you know, looking for work, and what would be the most important skills you'll be looking for.
Yeah, I think it's important to be aware, guys, that that, you know, your destiny is in your hands. It's really important if there's someone that you find really interesting to make that opportunity available. So if a student approached me and said, I'd love to be one of your students, so I'd absolutely be happy to accommodate them. What you'll find is if you ask for something, you'll receive it in return. People always want to help. I find a lot of students and people generally are quite nervous about asking, but please don't be. Get out there and interrogate who might be a really good tutor for you to learn from. As Benji was saying, it's good to seek out different opportunities. And so there's some tutors that have very conceptual ideas, perhaps like myself, and then there's other tutors that are much more focused on spatial and architectural experiences of looking at floor plans and how someone might experience a space. So there's very different kind of tutors with different opinions, and please try and expose yourself to all of these different experiences, and you'll learn so much more. You can take all those tools and put them in your tool belt and become a stronger and stronger architect. So I think that question relates also about getting a job. If you really want a job with someone, don't take no for an answer. Just, there's always a way to get a job. When I was trying to get a job for Drew Heath working on the building site, I saw his work and I thought, geez, I'd love to go and work on a building site. How am I going to make this happen? And so I actually volunteered for him at the beginning, just, as an assistant. And then that allowed me then to transition into a paid role. I know that's not ideal. It's not the ideal scenario, but there's other examples, like when I went and worked for Norman Foster, I always had my eyes and ears open, to these kind of opportunities. And when I found out that there was someone who had just come from that office, I thought, okay, here we go. I've got to try and talk to this guy and ask him, can you please get me a recommendation for an interview? So to answer the question there, please take the initiative. Those opportunities are in your hands. Just ask.
Jesse, I was just going to add to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds great.
While you were talking, I had a look at my own CV to see how many people I've worked for. 21.
Wow.
So I'm a little bit older, but I will say that's part of, it's tailored to each personality and what your interests are. However, you might not get it the first time. It took me 21 goes to get where I want to be. So there's no harm in trying, right?
Yeah, I agree, Benji. Don't be scared of making a mistake as well, guys. Just get in there and have a go. No question is a bad question. I always tell that to my students. Please just ask any question that you feel is interesting to you, because often they're very important.
In terms of skill-wise, which was the second part of the question, is there anything in particular you're looking for, or other tutors might be looking for?
Absolutely. Everyone kind of thinks that it's all about the grades you get, or what programs they have. How my guy I employed recently, he didn't have those ArchiCAD experience. I'm not looking for particular requirements. I don't have a checkbox that I'm checking things. What I'm really looking for someone is who's really excited, who's passionate, and who wants the job. Who wants the job? If someone comes to me and says, I really want this job, I'm going to give them the job, because they're the kind of people that you need to give you energy and to drive something forward. So I would say the best way to get a job is to ask. To be the person that's it's engaging and trying to get the job. Be passionate. Be energetic. Be passionate. That's what's going to get you the job.
You might just get a few email requests after this, Jesse, to say. I think the next one is from Carson. Carson, do you want to read your own one out and say hi to Jared and Celine Ivy? He's still in here. Carson?
Well, sure. Hey, Jared, Celine, Ivy, long time no see. Hello. And I'm just wondering what is the reason that made you guys to work full-time after graduating from undergrad instead of going straight to master?
Well, for me, I would say fact that I was extremely tired after 3 years of architecture. I was one of those people who finished their HSC, jumped straight into uni without any gap year or anything. So that was 13 years of education, topped with another 3. And I thought it's a bit of a break. I'm using this year to work part-time, full-time, to see if I genuinely love architecture, if I truly want to be an architect in the future. As Jessie said earlier, there's so many pathways through this degree. It's not just architecture that I might want to do. There might be something even better. And I'm taking this year to explore and just learn as much as I can and see where it's going to take me. I might do masters, I might not. I probably will take masters, but yeah. So learning about myself, that's the point of this year.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Ivy. It was similar for me in a way. Also, after HSC, jumped right in. I think it's important as well. I heard a lot through the grapevine and other people from masters that taking a break to work before going into masters can be extremely valuable for masters as well, because you're able to learn about how it works in the real world, and you can use what you learn from your practice and how they approach design and how they approach their practice, and kind of bring a little bit of that maybe into your masters as well, and that may be able to aid you in some sort of way. Also in masters you start learning a bit more about how practice works and the cogs behind all of that. So if you're already exposed to that, you already have a bit of a prerequisite knowledge, and it helps you move forward through masters a little bit easier. But besides that as well, I'm not going to lie, I think savings and money is definitely part of the equation. I think that's a very valid reason as well. It's very difficult working part-time and studying part-time to also support yourself. I'm lucky to be living at home, but it's especially more difficult if you don't live at home as well. So I think just having a break, working full-time, focusing on generating some savings makes you a lot more comfortable, especially when you go back to masters, especially when you need to spend money on all that laser cutting and 3D printing, to know that you have the resources. But jokes aside, yeah, that is also one of my reasons, just on top of having a break, but keen to get back into masters in the next year or so.
Yeah, I agree with Ivy and Jared there. I think taking a break between degrees is a good idea. It just gives you more energy, and you come back into the masters with a passion. You know, architecture is a very long process. It's like being a turtle. You know, it's about persistence and patience. So take your time, guys. There's no rush. You know, please try and enjoy it, because you're going to be an architect after you graduate for 40 years or something. You know, so just enjoy it and take care of yourselves. Yeah, as Jared was saying.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think quite similar to Jared and Ivy. I just decided that the three to 4 years of doing all-nighters wasn't too good for me. But also, I think to add on to that, I think being in an academic headspace didn't actually teach me as much as I did the moment I jumped up into full-time work. I think really working closely with clients, working closely with my coworkers really taught me how to actually understand the human scale, how to understand construction, and how to understand really what my workflow was like. And I think in uni, a lot of it is very theoretical. So I think I needed to truly understand it in my head and my heart, what I was doing in my undergrad. So really being able to take the time to digest, you know, and take a step back from the submissions before going into masters. And with masters, I know in UNSW there's a couple of streams that you can take, which is, you know, you can either do the general stream, the residential stream, and you know, social. So I think it's important to also take a step back to evaluate what you're really passionate about before you actually jump into a specialization. Yeah.
That's also not to say, so it's funnily that all three of us have a very similar experience, but for some people, heading into masters straight away works for them. So we have quite a few friends who are just doing masters or doing masters and working part-time. So there really are so many different things you can do, and you can just find what works for you. And remember, uni and masters is extremely flexible, so you can always start and stop if you don't like it, or same with work. So you just got to figure out what works best for you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you went into one stream, for example, and it didn't feel comfortable, don't feel obliged to stick with that. You can change. If you start with a tutor in an architectural design subject and you can see the personalities aren't matching, you can change your tutor. Please, if you ask, everything is possible, So if you're not comfortable in a certain situation, please talk to the lecturer, and there's opportunities for you to be moved. I know a lot of students have trouble sometimes with the tutors they might have, and it can affect them quite significantly. So please, there's opportunities to move around. Just keep that in mind.
I think that's really helpful, because I know sometimes people can be really nervous to be asking, especially admin stuff in classes, and whether they work well or not with their tutors. So I think that's good to keep in mind for everybody, that if it's just not working for you, don't be afraid to ask. I think
Tracy, did you ever think about leaving my class, or?
No, I'm kidding. No, it was really nice to be in your class. Actually, it was a really different approach from how we've done the past two studios. Jesse's really big on the big idea, so that was a bit hard to I think with Jesse, no shade, but if you ask him a question, it's very much, he will just lead you back to your big idea, and it's something that you really have to answer yourself. You're not going to be spoon-fed. And with different tutors, they're going to have different approaches. So it was a really nice way of learning, See, there wasn't any shade there. So the next question was from Chloe, and it was sort of about how lockdown or COVID has affected you guys. But I think we've sort of answered that. But I'd like to add on to that question and sort of say, what's the biggest lesson you've sort of learnt from being in lockdown or from this COVID situation? It's open to anyone.
I'll just jump in.
No, I was just going to say different iteration. Yeah, go on, Jared. Sorry.
I think just for me, I've learned how important it is, firstly, just within the profession, how many people you have to work with in communication and how vital that is, and how some of those systems can break down when you have to be in a different location. So that's, I think, a really important part, especially at the much larger firms. I think that scales up. And secondly, I think in terms of just your own motivation and mental health, the support that you have even outside of architecture from your family and your friends, just as a general thing for lockdown even, I think that's what keeps us going. We're all in this together. We'll get out of it eventually, and as long as we have people that we can see virtually, keep up to date with, and just make sure to check in, you know what I mean? And that gets us through it. But yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And guys, we are holding more social events as well this term. So come join us, come join the community that Celine and Jared obviously helped build as well over the years. And it'd be really good to see you guys in our events. And I guess another take on that question, Jesse, is from an employer perspective, I guess, how has COVID impacted your firm, or I guess your role as someone who's seeking graduates or just more employees in general? I know there's this kind of fear that with the lockdown and just the state of things, there's not as much employment or work opportunities or even internships. And I think I know a lot of people have either just been laid off for the internship just because of the current conditions, and a lot of firms have just shut their doors temporarily. Constructions have been put to a halt, although I think it's been allowed to go through now this morning, but I know construction was put through a halt for a long period of time. So as an employer, how do you think that that's affected the way the firm's kind of running, or?
Yeah, it certainly has. I think, as Jared was saying, it's the kind of opportunity for communication is so important, and those kind of just little opportunities where you might bump into someone and share an idea. Those opportunities can be lost. So it is challenging, especially in the creative disciplines. One thing I'd like to reflect on, though, and I think it's important, especially with university students and COVID as well, is the impact on people's mental health. And I think it's just important to clarify, similarly to that question we were discussing with David at the beginning, we all have our ups and downs. Sometimes you're feeling great and sometimes you're not feeling great. And I remember feeling that way when I was at university. I remember I did some projects and I thought, what's going on here? This is just not happening. It's like playing, but architecture, it's very creative. It's like playing guitar. Sometimes you'll sing a really beautiful song and then sometimes you won't. And don't take that personally. You're not a failure. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just, we all have our ups and downs. And so I think it's the same with COVID. It's important to reach out and have events like this so we're all kind of working together. So if you see one of your if one of your colleagues at uni and, is looking a bit tired or something, maybe just, have a coffee or have a Zoom with them, or, just reach out and just say hello, Just be there for support. It's a really important thing when you're at university. I remember when I was doing my master's, I was working really hard, and one of my colleagues just said, "Hey Jesse, are you doing okay? And let me help you out with picking up that printing." That she drove me to the printer, and I just felt there was just a wonderful sense of support, just from a small little kind of a thing like that. It can actually really help someone. So. Take care of yourselves, guys. Yeah, it's important.
I think architecture is a very communal discipline, if anything. I know, Jesse, you talked about that before, just the importance of community. And Celine, even when you said you spent a lot of your time at uni kind of fostering a community in the architecture society, just, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people, building for people, and kind of having that at the back of your mind. The way you're getting jobs is by meeting people, approaching people, talking to people. So it's all about everyone else and how you relate with them. So make sure you guys just reach out to everyone, not just for work, but just, through just a friendly conversation. That one thing can lead to another, and just being really friendly to everyone, guys.
I'd just like to add, so part of that question, which was in terms of finding work during a pandemic and like issues with that. So I'm not like an expert on the architectural jobs market or anything, but just anecdotally, I have a friend who, just this past week actually just got a job at a big company with like 80 people. And so she'll be working virtually, fresh off the boat. She hasn't worked in architecture for a while. So it's not impossible. I think with architecture, it goes through waves. Kind of you generally see or feel as a student, and the kind of graduate roles that become available. Even though construction stopped temporarily, given the time scale of architecture and the time that projects take, work is still able to keep going during a pandemic, which is lucky for our kind of industry. Not a lot of industries can say the same. So it just depends on those kinds of waves, and it's not impossible. So still keep reaching out. It's just virtual now, so it's the same as always. So don't let that give you any hesitation, if that helps.
Yeah, guys, so make sure to reach out, and like Jared said, because you never know, different firms just work differently. Like smaller firms, maybe it's harder to get in at this current moment. Doesn't mean they won't open again, but maybe larger firms who continually have projects and jobs might have just a position for you. And keep in mind, there are different positions in a firm, obviously, and different roles. So you guys could potentially fill that in. There's a question here from Narissa. Narissa asked, what has been your biggest challenge so far, and how do you deal with creative blocks? And I assume that is more so for Jesse, because I think Celine mentioned as well, and Jared as well, it's different being in uni versus at work as a student, because you can't really, test out these kind of limits in your design. When you get, even Hal mentioned, it's not like construction one where you draw up a simple plan. It's very much more I guess, detailed, and it's different. It's very different and systematic. But I think as for Jesse, what's your, I guess, what do you do when you stumble upon a creative block in your firm?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of good answers for that. One of them is, what Tracy was saying. I always, with my students, I really get them to focus on, what is this thing really about? What are you really trying to do with this project? Because you can come back to that, and that will give you the strength to find the right answer. So as I was saying with the Bondi Surf Club project, it's really about courtyards, and so the project just comes back to that idea, and that has allowed my decisions to kind of to continue. The other thing I think that's really valuable to do is, at the moment it's a little bit difficult, but you could do it digitally, is visit the site. The site has an immense amount of information. There's people there, there's the landscape, there's existing buildings, there's trees, there's the horizon, there's clouds. All of these things have incredible amount of creative opportunity. And the other way that I kind of I gain inspiration is actually looking at other architects' works. Can you guys see my screen here?
Yes, you can.
This? Yeah, so I've got this library of just projects, and sometimes when I'm like really stuck, I'll just go through this and just totally immerse myself in images. Like actually I'll just kind of scroll through image by image by image just to kind of flood my mind. It's a bit hard to go through these with you guys in the call, but and I used to do that similar thing when I was at university. I used to go to the library, and I would sit in the bookshelves of the library and just look at magazines, just looking at images and images and images. And by the end of it, my brain was just on fire. It was alive. So that's another tip to kind of open up a blockage. So there's probably 3 ways. Find the core of your idea, visit the site, and kind of expose yourself to other architecture and precedents and images. Are we still here, guys?
Still here. I think we have a question for you again, Jesse, from Samantha Wall. What kind of qualities do successful architects have? And how did it feel to start your own firm?
Yeah, okay. Let's throw over to the audience here. Ivy, we haven't heard from you much. What qualities do you think successful architects have? That's really interesting, because the firm you're working at is a fantastic firm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think communication, effective communication, that's clear and concise, I think. And the ability to translate your ideas to not just people who have the experience and knowledge, but also to those that aren't in the industry. For me, I think it was when I realized I was talking to my friends who weren't in architecture, and for them to understand how all these architectural concepts that I explained, not through just words, but also through diagrams and drawings, it was very, it was a really good feeling that other people would be able to understand all of these concepts and how it would translate into the real world.
I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. I think, guys, architecture is not for architects. It's for people. So when you're creating a piece of architecture, when you use these words like space and proportions and ratio, and no one understands what that actually means. And so when you actually get out there in the real world, you've just got to explain something clearly and logically. Like, this is a place to have a picnic. This is where, you might take a shower. People understand, these kind of much more emotional ideas. Or, or you take an architecture model and you actually show them physically. Just to begin with here, guys, imagine if I had gone to the client and said, look, we're going to build a building way out here, 50 meters into the park. What do you think about that? They're going to say you're crazy. But I've used logic to say, look, we've got to respect the heritage. We look at the context. We make sure this is an appropriate place as a public area for the community. And so that you're logically explaining something. You're not just saying, look, we're going to build a building in the park. because, you know, it's just, you've got no chance of doing that. So as Ivy was saying, you know, communicating clearly is very important.
Awesome. We've got 3 more questions. One question for Ivy, a big question about construction, and a fun little question. We'll start with the Ivy question from Will. How did you grow your public portfolio, i.e. Instagram, and also trying to increase exposure?
Very good question. So my public portfolio, my Instagram, I didn't really intend it for it to be something that I used to look for a job. It was really just sharing my work with my friends. And it just, after I finished my work, like I didn't want to have my things just like laying in my computer. Like I wanted to show it out to the world. And there was no real intention to like have it like be what it is now, I guess, and to build it up as much as possible. And I also found that it was a good thing for people in the years below to have a look at. I would always be showing, I did peer mentoring, so I mentored a bunch of students, and they found that very useful. So that caused me to post even more on it because I knew it was helping them. Yeah, and as for me, when I was in first year, I always looked up to students that were older than I was and their own pages, and I always took a lot of inspiration from that. But I guess increasing exposure, I was always telling my friends about my portfolio by Instagram and getting them to follow me as well. But yeah, it was more of tracking my own journey and being able to scroll all the way down and see how I've progressed, and all the way from first year all the way to my 3rd year work. Yeah, that was kind of it. More of tracking my own progress, to be honest.
Yeah, I really enjoy that, Ivy. I think, you know, often you don't know what the end game is. Guys, just start doing stuff and then things happen. It's very similar for me in my practice. You know, I just do things that I really enjoy, and then wow, you know, it actually leads to something else. And I always tell my students, you know, when I'm teaching, put the drawings on the wall, because that allows other people to see them and allows other people to learn from them. And that's what Ivy's doing in a digital way. You know, she's putting it on Instagram, so she's allowing other people to learn from her mistakes, and then they give her feedback and she learns. And that's part of the reason I tutor, because I teach, because that process of teaching allows me to learn. So the more you contribute, the more you receive in return.
I also wanted to say that I've put Ivy's Instagram in the chat. If you haven't seen her stuff, it's honestly like so amazing. I'm like fangirling a little bit right now. Like her models and her like drawings are like chef's kiss, you know?
You know what, Ivy? Actually, I found out about you and your online portfolio when I was in first year Sequana. Like she really liked your work. She really liked your work when she was in your class, and she's like, oh my God, you have to look at this girl's Instagram. So word of mouth, and I guess like being really passionate about what you do and what you like doing goes to show that people can see that, people can spot talent, people can spread talent for you. So just having fun with it, I think it's a really good one. So yeah, because that definitely was the way I found out about you, because someone told me about it.
And also that's like my way of, I guess, putting myself out there and making more connections. I actually remember the first time, my first contact with Jean was her messaging me, being like, oh my God,
yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
forgot.
And I was like, oh my God, someone loves my work. And it was really nice. And that was her way of reaching out and making connections. And I guess growing your like little network of like architecture friends, and putting yourself out there, getting to know more people, and they might be people that you end up working with. And here we are 2-3 years later, you know.
A lot of people from other universities also do the same thing, so it's good to take a look at their work as well on Instagram. Were you saying something, Jane? Sorry.
No, that's all good. I think the next there's a question, but there is also a smart comment if you want to read that one out.
We'll do the construction question first.
Yeah, I think Jesse, if you wanted to look at that in the chat, there was a smart comment about the coffee there for you as well. But there is a construction question from Natalie here.
Come over, guys. Come over. Seriously, you know, if you want to. There's always opportunities. There's so many things going on. There's always opportunities. As I said, just ask.
There's a question about construction here. What's your opinions on the future of construction? Do you think we will run out of spaces to build one day? And the past decades, there's been rapid speed of residential and commercial development. Is it too fast? Will there be less employment opportunities? I think that's a very interesting one. I think, Ben, if you're still around, that might be a really good question for you as well. And I know, Celine, you're really interested in construction as well. So if anyone's got input on that question.
I just want to just add to that question. I think when I was in university, architecture was very narrow-minded in a sense where it was like empty plot of land, plonk a building down. And I think for me, what opened my eyes was during the bushfires, when a lot of people were unfortunately losing their homes. And I saw the initiative that a whole lot of designers and architects were coming together to help volunteer their services to people to rebuild their homes. And I realized that, and also through working, is that it's not always continually expanding and finding new places to plonk new things. Things happen and people lose their homes, and architects work in that way to build a better life for people. And that's where sort of new and interesting ideas come into play as well, because it's not just, pumping out like 100 new buildings for people, but it's also making sure that people are safe in these areas. And it could also be, architecture could also be designing comfortable places for densely populated cities. That's where architects come in as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can keep yourself employed by allowing yourself to go into, commercial, as well as designing and building up solutions that are maybe not currently working as effectively for the people who live in these spaces.
Yeah, I think, guys, just to clarify, in Australia, it's really the land of opportunity. There's a lot of other countries where there's nowhere near as many opportunities. So I think in Europe, for example, it's very hard to build buildings. If you say to some of my colleagues, I've built buildings, and they're absolutely astounded. So Australia is a great place for opportunities, and the construction industry here is still very strong. One of the things you always hear architects talking about is sustainability, and really the most sustainable way to create a new building is by keeping the existing building. There's a lot of greenwashing where they say, look, we're going to demolish all these buildings and build this new, super efficient high-rise. I think we need to be careful about that. I think we really need to respect our heritage, our cultural heritage, our existing buildings, and reuse them as much as possible, so that we are addressing those needs of for construction, but also thinking about how we kind of maintain the planet as well.
Fantastic. I think that covers it. Natalie, if you've got any more further questions, maybe type them below. But I think that covered it really well as well. And yeah, just keeping in mind that there are, like architecture, construction also has different branches and positions as well. And there are still many ways that you can, I guess, find employment in construction or find work in construction as well. And I think that might be the last question, but I do have a question for all of you. I guess it kind of came from Jesse's question about how, and his interview. What are your tips for interviews for all of you? I know Hao and Ivy, you guys had very different interview experiences, and Ivy as well. What came first for you, the portfolio or the job offer? And for everyone else, what are your tips for interviews? So Ivy, maybe start with you.
For me, it was my portfolio that came first. It was about mid-second year, and I was thinking, and I saw this opportunity for Hassel.
And I thought I might just start making my portfolio now. Like I never know when a job opportunity that I might want to apply for might come up. So it was just, it was literally came up with me just putting all my things in an InDesign document and pulling that up. But also about the interview, I think really just knowing yourself and your projects really well, to the point where you don't even need like a portfolio, like you can just speak for yourself. And then the portfolio kind of comes in as like a visual, as like a supporting kind of document for yourself. Because really it's all about your attitude, and then your like hard and soft skills kind of thing, and how you're able to like present yourself to the person that that is interviewing you.
Yeah. Sorry guys, I think I'm a bit. Sorry, I think I cut out there. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think also with social media, like Ivy said before, we are at an advantage. I know Jesse, you said that before, not the start of computers, but you're working with hand drawings and stuff. But like with us now, at this kind of day and age with social media, we can reach out in many different ways. You know, LinkedIn is one way. You can put your work up there if you really wanted to. You could put it on on Instagram, and there's many ways to reach out. It doesn't have to be, you know, if you're a shy person, maybe one way to, I guess, approach someone is by passively putting it out there. I'm hoping that they'll see it, or maybe sending it through directly by email is a better opportunity for you, rather than you know, just hoping someone will come by it. But I know Ivy did. I think they approached you via Instagram, which is a testament to that. But yeah, guys, just putting your work out there, and then having that work not speak for you, but you know, speak with you, and you know, kind of support what you sell yourself as. I think it's a good point. Jared or Celine, maybe.
I just wanted to quickly add another great resource for inspiration for portfolios and a place to put them is Issue. So ISSW. I don't know how many of you know of that. But yeah, it's a really great resource. You just type in and search architecture portfolios, and there's so much inspiration, so many brilliant ones there that you can use. But as a way to display your portfolios and share as links, it's a great a website to view them as well. So just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen, I think last year's exhibition was also published on Issue. I don't know if you guys know that, but they used that. Jared and Ivy, your work's up there as well, just saying, for that one. But yeah, maybe Hal as well. If you want to talk about more about your interview, and Jesse, like, I guess, you know, what about you? What do you look for in an interview, as opposed to asking questions at coffee? What do you look for in an interview, or like what would you ask? What are some questions we should be prepared for in an interview as well, I guess?
I think the questions is why are you, so the base of the base, the question was why you choose architecture. This is why I say why you choose that. When you got the question of that, and then you can ask every questions they ask you for why you like what this project in your portfolio is, what's this basically. So it's all based on why you choose architecture, why you choose to study architecture, why you want to be an architect.
One of the things that I found interesting about Hal and his past experience was some of his family's background, you know, so in real estate. So I understood that he's kind of a person is driven to kind of help his family and grow the business. So similar background to me in a way. So that kind of background story was really interesting. I think sometimes it can be hard to know exactly why you're doing architecture as well. So that is an ongoing kind of journey for a lot of people. But if you can just find something you're passionate about, similar to Ivy, you know, and push forward with things, opportunities will arise. I remember one of the jobs that I've got first a long time ago. I was putting my work on the internet actually to a architecture forum. And then someone through the architecture forum contacted me and said, "Oh, Jesse, why don't you come over for an interview?" And then before that, my very first job, I got through my lecturer at the time. The lecturer introduced me to Gabriel Poole. You know, that was right at the beginning of my career. So there's lots of different possibilities out there. Just kind of keep your eyes open.
Should we end it here? We should end it here.
Yeah.
We ran a bit over, but thank you so much for sticking out for us. Celine, Jared, Ivy, thank you for coming
And
out
Jesse
tonight.
and Dan and Hal as well. Thanks, guys, for coming. It's good to get the two different perspectives. I think that's get the conversation going. And I think the takeaway for tonight is, you know, again, something we said in the other event, David, as well, is just knowing, you know, why do you want to do this? And everyone's answer is going to be different. And knowing that, you know, just because you're doing architecture now doesn't mean you have to do it next year. You can take a break. You can go get a job. You can do something else completely, go into construction for a little bit, and just come back to it if that's what you really want. But I think the main thing is just knowing what you want, why you're doing it, and that carries through in your job interview, in your portfolio, knowing what you're good at, and actually even knowing what you're not good at, and maybe testing that water out and kind of improving there helps everyone as a designer. And remembering that it's all about community. You know, that's why we do what we do here as well. And just realizing that as an architect, and not even an architect, just as creative people in general, the reason we are in a creative path is to share our work, you know, to create something and have someone else see it, appreciate it. So like Ivy said, create it, you know, show it off, let people appreciate it. I think that's the really main thing. There's no point in becoming a designer if no one's going to look at your work. You know, I think something we have to accept is as architects, we all have somewhat of a ego, but that's all very, you know, it's a good ego because I think we're all very talented people and we're here because we made it here, and we wouldn't be here if we didn't have any creative potential. So I think kind of make use of that and just be brave and put it out there is a really good takeaway from today's work. And like Jesse said, just ask. And you never know, one person might know someone knows someone else. So thanks, guys, for coming. And if you guys are interested in our events, just stay tuned to our social media as well. But other than that, good night, everyone. And thank you. And thanks to Tracy and David for hosting tonight's event as well.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks for having us. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Make
you
sure
wanna
to
say
reach out if you're